Hello and welcome to this NDTV exclusive. We're now at the end of phase one of what is already turning out to be a fascinating, somewhat turmoil-hit elections for the Congress president's post. And joining me is the first person to throw his hat officially into the ring, Shashi Tharoor. He joins me just before he's about to go off and file his nomination. Shashi Tharoor, thanks very much indeed for joining us. You were the first one to throw your hat in the ring. Little did you know all that would follow. But just to go back, because this is the first chance we're getting to talk to you since you did that. I know you were thinking about it. There were sort of reports that you were planning to run. But what was the tipping point? What finally made you decide, I'm going to have a shot at this?
The first time there actually was an election announced. Remember, I've been calling for elections for the party presidency ever since Rahul Gandhi resigned in July 2019. If you look at Google, my first interviews at that time, I was very clear that in the absence of an elected president, that it was necessary for the party to use this mechanism.
Were you thinking about running as far back as that?
No. I just want, my whole message was that elections are desirable and they will do good for the party. That was my basic
message. That's fair. But then what is the
point?
Yeah.
Then from then onwards, I've repeated this demand. I repeated it again earlier this year. But when the Congress Working Committee decided there would actually be elections, you know, all the cynics said, this is this talk, there won't be any elections.
It'll just be a ring,
the Working Committee is bound to just turn to Rahul Gandhi again. Rahul Gandhi made it very clear he was not going to take it, that his resignation was genuine and he didn't want the position. And I think there was a certain disbelief amongst some of the grandees and indeed amongst the cynics who are perhaps not grandees that this is ever going to happen. I decided to take the party at its word. The party had said there will be elections. And I decided to find out about the process, figure out how I could put my hat forward if needed. The most proximate trigger then was I wrote an article in which I reiterated the point I've made before, that elections are good. And I pointed out how the British Conservative Party had gained in public attention and sympathy because of their internal elections. I said, why don't we do the same thing? And I was astonished when about 100 different party colleagues from across the country, and some very unexpected ones also, called me and said, great article, you ought to be the one putting his hat forward. And I began thinking about it seriously only then. That was about a few weeks ago. And then as the thing gathered momentum, some of us were talking about it, and I was encouraged by friends and colleagues to go ahead and
you
do
finally
it.
did
And here
that.
I am.
But tell us why you went to meet Sonia Gandhi before you finally announced it. Because there's a little bit of a question mark on that. Like, why you didn't need her permission?
No,
why
exactly.
Did you go
It was the media, I'm sorry to say, that said he's gone to get a green light. I didn't go to get any green light. I just went to find out what was the official attitude to this. I mean, I've been hearing the cynics every day saying this whole thing is a farce, it'll never happen, there'll be no election. And I said, but they're just living up to the party constitution. There's nothing.
So you went to meet her to find out
what her attitude was. And frankly, if she might have, for example, if she had said, which she could have within her rights to do so, listen, Shashi, why do you want to do this? Why do you want to contest? We've always done things by consensus. Well, my suggestion is leave it to us. We'll find the right person. There was nothing of that. On the contrary, she said exactly the opposite.
What did she say? What did
she
Sonia
said
Gandhi
that we believe the elections are good for the party, and if you want to contest, you're most welcome. I said, but will you go have an official candidate? Is that going to be the... And she said, absolutely, there will be no official candidate. And as far as I'm concerned, the entire family will stay neutral in the race. And by the way, I happened to have the same conversation, or versions thereof, with both Priyanka Gandhi and Rahul Gandhi, and I got the same message consistently. Then Digvijay Singh went to see Sonia Gandhi and got the same message also. So it's very clear. All candidates or potential candidates are being told, no one is getting our backing. We wish you luck. Go ahead and contest.
But if Rahul Gandhi had run, would you have run?
That's a hypothetical question right now.
No, but I'm asking, was that also on your mind when you went to meet Sonia Gandhi to find out, was Rahul serious about not running?
By then it was pretty clear he was serious. In fact, when he stepped down in 2019, he told us, the Congress MPs, that he wanted to take accountability for the defeat. I was one of those who tried to talk him out of it. I remember saying, yeah, you'll take accountability for the defeat, but who'll take accountability for the revival? That's your job. And he said, no, it'll be somebody else's job. And for a couple of years, he stuck strongly to that view. And therefore, it became very clear by the time the Working Committee took the decision to call these elections,
that he wasn't?
That had he decided to take it, it would have preempted the election. But once the elections are going ahead, he wasn't taking it.
He wasn't going to take it. No. But you say that there was no, or at least there was an assurance that there'll be no official candidate.
Yeah.
Right? But within hours of your filing your nomination comes the announcement of Ashok Gehlot, who widely was being seen as a quote-unquote official candidate.
So what I was
he's
repeatedly,
now pulled out, but yeah.
repeatedly told by Mrs. Gandhi and others was that that was a perception problem. It was not from them. And indeed, the moment an official spokesman chose to use his platform to attack me, he was immediately rapped on the knuckles and a statement was issued that nobody will attack any candidate in this and that the party machinery will remain neutral. I think this is a very healthy approach.
This was a reference to tweets, for those who don't know, Gaurav Vallabh, who's a party spokesperson, who said the only thing Shashi Tharoor is good for is to write letters to Sonia Gandhi when she was unwell.
Yeah. Except I didn't actually write a letter, I signed a letter, and it was one letter, not letters, but that's neither here nor there.
But you know, Shashi, the question really is about whether this is being seen as a serious contest. There is a school of thought that believes that Shashi Tharoor is not running a serious election. This is a symbolic election.
Well, I think that one of the things that's going to dispel that concern is going to be to see the number of nominations we've gathered from colleagues across the country. We have party workers, and I'm not talking about big names, I'm talking about, for the most part, rather ordinary party workers, idealists, young people in many cases, who have signed from Kashmir to Nagaland, from Punjab to Tamil Nadu. And we are going to come in with a significant number of forms.
But you need heavyweights. You need MPs, you need minutes, you need chief ministers.
Each vote counts exactly the same as anybody else. An ordinary Karyakarta, his vote weighs exactly the same as the chief minister's when the totals are being added up.
But you know, speaking to some of the signatories, the G23 signatories, such as they are, you were one of those who signed that letter, one gets the impression that they didn't really have a sense that you're going to contest. That you kind of went solo on this.
Yeah, I didn't feel a particular need to speak to colleagues beyond their individual capacity. I've spoken to each of them individually. I don't think any of them can deny, but I don't think there is an organization called the G23 except in the media's imagination. There happened to be a letter drafted by a couple of senior colleagues who frankly are no longer in the party, but who invited others to sign. And that letter was frankly something which happened to be signed by 23 because during the COVID lockdown they were in Delhi.
Fair enough, but I'm saying that for you, like for example, an Anand Sharma or a Prithviraj Chavan and all these people, they knew that you were going to throw your hat in the ring.
Of course, I went and saw each. I saw Prithviraj Chavan personally. I spoke to Anand on the phone. I've spoken to Manish many times, and Manish has come here and I've gone to his place. So they're all aware. If they now claim that they didn't know, then I'm sorry, that surprises me.
But are they going to back you though? Because that's something which is...
The point is I need the backing of 9,100 people, not of 23. It's entirely up to each individual whether they wish to back me or not. But as I say, I am not the candidate of the G23. This is a myth. There is no such thing.
The reason I was asking, Shashi, is because when you take someone like Digvijay Singh, who seems to be, someone who might be running against you, he came to see you, by the way. Was that his own... Tell me, did
That's
he just
right. He called and asked if he could come over, and I said he'd be most welcome. He's a good friend. We are good friends. I was a good friend of Mr. Gehlot as well, and I had called on him earlier a few weeks ago at Rajasthan House. The important thing to recognize is that this is not a protest candidacy. This is a contest amongst colleagues in the party. And yes, you may say that 14 years in the party is that of a relative newcomer by comparison with people who've been around for 40 years, and I fully accept that. But I think 14 years is long enough to make a contribution and to have demonstrated both one's loyalty to the party and its ideals and beliefs, and to have had multiple opportunities to demonstrate it, which I've done in Parliament and a number of my speeches and interventions, in the books I've written, the articles I've written. I've been a fairly clear and coherent voice for what the Congress stands for and a strong critic of what the BJP government has been doing to our country. So I don't think that I need to explain away my candidacy. In fact,
you're not daunted by the fact that you may have someone like a Digvijay Singh fight against you?
Not at all. In fact, what's interesting is that a large number of those who called me from around the country and urged me to contest made the point that they felt I could attract support that goes beyond the traditional Congress voters. See, we've been stuck at a ceiling of 19% in 2 elections. And if we remain at that ceiling or less, we don't have a future. Right. We absolutely have got to be able to appeal to people who may have voted for us once and have ceased to do so in the last 2 elections.
Okay.
And if you have somebody who's able to go beyond the sort of business as usual approach of the Congress, that may help the party. That's the logic.
What would you say to those who say that how does Shashi Tharoor from South India with his Oxbridge accent hope to become president of the Congress? and lead it to,
if
new heights.
If there are people who don't want to look beyond my accent, then they don't have to vote for me. Ultimately, look,
No, but
we
I'm
have
saying
an
the
electoral
perception.
college.
The
We have
perception.
if the implication is that I'm some sort of elitist, I'll point out that I have won 3 Lok Sabha elections. That Thiruvananthapuram, despite being the capital of Kerala, is a 66% rural constituency. That I have fisherfolk, I have hill dwellers, I have tribals, I have all sorts of people whose votes I need to attract. And I've done so. I've been attentive to the problems of people of different backgrounds. And when I go amongst the people,
Sure.
I don't think that anyone sees me as some sort of transplanted Oxbridge type. By the way, I never studied in Oxbridge, I only debated there.
No, so
So
it's more the accent
the
rather than the
accent
background.
is a Stephanian accent.
It's a Stephanian
I can point
accent.
you
Okay,
to 10
fine.
others who've done
Okay.
that.
But you say that this is something you're running seriously. You want to, if you win, change the Congress party. But there are others who would say that you will end up, or whoever wins, ends up as a puppet president. That is still going to be the Gandhis with the remote control.
Look, I think we'll cross all those bridges when we come to it. I certainly believe that the Gandhis' place in the Congress party, their inextricable links with the DNA of the party is great, and that there's no question of in any way separating ourselves from them, their legacy and so on. But if they don't want to be actively involved, I don't understand where the fear comes from.
No, but what sort of role do you see Rahul Gandhi playing? Were you or anyone else to become president, a non-Gandhi, what role
I think
would a Rahul Gandhi play?
That would really be for him to define. For example,
What would you like him to, what sort of role as a president would you like him to play?
well, if I become president in 3 weeks' time,
Yes.
the Bharat Jodo Yatra still has 4 more months to run, or 3 more months to run. And I would certainly be very proud and happy if he continued to go along on that path. And perhaps I'd go and march with him for a day or two, but not for 150 days.
No, but I'll tell
he
you
can
that-
do that.
No, the implication of my question, Shashi, was that the sense is that even though the Gandhis may not be running, Rahul is not running, but he is in a sense de facto still the boss. If you take the Bharat Jodo Yatra right now, which is the primary big political activity by the Congress, he's still the face of that.
You see, there's no question about the appeal that he and other Gandhi members, Gandhi family members have to the voting public. So, for the party not to use an asset like this would be foolish. At the same time, he has made it clear that he doesn't want to play the kind of role that you're suddenly saying you're afraid he'll play. Frankly, if he wanted to be president of the party, he could do it with a snap of his fingers tomorrow. He's chosen not to. So I think it's an implication of bad faith for you to suggest that having declined a job he could have had, he will then interfere with other people doing the job. I don't see that that makes any sense as an argument.
No, only because even during this time when he's not been president, a lot of the key decisions taken by the party are attributed to him.
Well, I
So
think
there
you'd have
has
to ask
been
the
this kind of
Congress
backseat
president
driving.
if that's the case, or whether she was the one who took or approved these decisions. So, look, let's wait. If the party wants to turn over a new leaf, let's give the party the opportunity. Why are we sitting here speculating
Okay,
about
fair enough.
hypothetical?
Let's assume that he's not actually going to be, or they are not going to be doing the remote control. But in terms of a face of the Congress, who's the leader, especially as you go into 2024, you have an election coming up. Is it going to be him, or if you're the president, should it be you?
Look, all of these things, frankly, this is something we'll happily deal with. Why not have all the faces involved? I mean, one of the great slogans of the UPA in 2014 against Mr. Modi's sort of rather obsessive sort of focus on himself was "Main nahi hum." We are really a party of the hums. We are a party of we. We want people to come together. We want large numbers of qualified, experienced people to work with each other and cooperate.
So you don't think that there's a likelihood that it could become Rahul versus Modi again in 2024? Because we've already seen, but I'm saying we saw how that went in the past 2 elections. Congress got wiped out.
So we'll
Is
have
it wise to pit Rahul as the face of the Congress in 2024?
You're dragging me down a path which hasn't yet been built. Let's come to that one. Look, in 2024,
Yes.
I think there will be a large number of factors have to be taken into account,
Okay.
including the possibility of a new opposition coalition or alliance,
Okay.
the question of which other parties may have contenders in the fray, whether our party itself would necessarily have the quote-unquote prime ministerial face, whether there would be any prime ministerial face. All of these things, others have to weigh in on their opinions, including the Gandhis. I don't think that we can sit here in a short conversation and make all these plans.
No, but I think, okay, so leaving that aside, the bigger challenge though, Shashi, is that how do you basically run a chaotic party like the Congress? Just look at what has happened in the past week or so in the course of this election.
Yes, so
in
my
Rajasthan,
answer is
elsewhere.
decentralization. And tomorrow, I mean later today, perhaps after submitting the the nominations, I intend to release a manifesto which we will send to every one of the 9100 voters, in which we'll put forward certain very important principles for reviving the party. And one of them will be to decentralize the functioning of the party.
No, but in simple terms, if you take, if you look at what happened in Rajasthan, which was essentially a power struggle, right, between an Ashok Gehlot and a Sachin Pilot, how would Shashi Tharoor, as Congress president, sort that out?
Well, it'd be very presumptuous of me to say that I could have sorted it out, but I will say that the time-honored practice in all parliamentary systems has been for the MLAs to elect their leader. Now, there may be reason for exceptions in some cases, but I think honestly we should try and do much more of that. In fact, when I first came into politics, a young Rahul Gandhi was passionately advocating elections at every level of the party. And I must say, having seen systems at work around the world, I was totally in agreement with him. And he knows that I've been supporting the idea of elections at all levels because of precisely the fact that it's the best way of resolving factional disputes.
Okay.
Instead of having somebody constantly referring things up to Delhi or passing resolutions in one sentence saying the Congress president.
So you're saying you'll try to end this high command culture in the Congress?
As a student of history, I've seen how the Congress party evolved with very, very strong so-called provincial leaders, what we call state leaders today. People who built the party in the areas that they hailed from, that they knew that they had roots in. We need to get back to that. I don't think that, Mr. Modi's style may work for Mr. Modi.
Right.
Good luck to him. But I think for us in the Congress to revive, what we have to offer is a party with a broad, solid base of state leaders,
Okay,
rather than a high command culture alone.
The other thing that you'll be inheriting, Shashi, is a party which is somewhat light on the bench. There's been a massive exodus, as you've seen yourself in the past several months and years. Ghulam Nabi Azad being the last big exit. How will Shashi Tharoor, as Congress president, stop that?
Well, first of all, I think we'll try and revive the party through changing the way it works in a lot of ways in a constructive spirit. This is not about undoing
But does that worry you? No, but does it worry you that you've
It
that
worries
there's so
me
many
that
people left?
we've lost a lot of talents that I wish we hadn't lost. But I'm hoping to create the party or recreate the party in a way that will attract some of them back. And I don't
Do you
believe
think some of them may actually come back?
I don't believe it's impossible. Some of those who form parties of their own may not be willing to come back in the merger sense, but they may well be willing to come back under the same umbrella, because what's interesting is that very few of them have left for ideological reasons. Most of them have left for reasons to do with either personality or a sense of personally not having had an opportunity to be heard or function in their own way. That's what some of them said. So we will have to create those opportunities, create more consultative mechanisms, and say, you'll get the respect you felt you were missing, come back.
Or the perception that this is a party that's just sinking, right? So you don't want to be on a sinking ship.
Well, I think that some of us have to keep that ship afloat and sailing to new destinations.
The other big challenge, how do you fight Narendra Modi?
Oh, I think actually the task is very clear. We have a stark distinction from the BJP and Mr. Modi when it comes to ideology. We don't believe in all this kind of demonization of the minorities that is overtly and covertly taking place. We believe the economy has been mismanaged. We believe, starting with demonetization and seeing the way things have gone wrong for people, the highest unemployment in this country. I have been asking voters wherever I've gone straight off, are you better off than you were 8 years ago because this government has come to power?
Sure.
No one is able to point to any benefits.
Not to interrupt, but I'm saying that's been the playbook for the Congress even earlier. Doesn't seem to have worked. So fundamentally, what is the thing that you would like to change? What do you think has been so far the approach that's not worked for the Congress?
There are a lot of things we need to do, including, frankly, we've got to be amongst people on the ground much more. And one of the things that works for the Congress in Kerala is that the Congress party is not only a party that fights elections every 5 years. It's on the ground, active all the time. There's this whole question of politics as social work, as an ethos of social work between elections, which in many parts of the country the party has lost. I mean, when some poor old lady doesn't know how to fill in a ration card application or a BPL certificate application or whatever, it's often the friendly Congress worker who goes and helps her do it. If some gunda bursts into her home and bashes her up and the police won't take action because the gunda is connected to the ruling party, it's the Congress guy who takes it up, calls me, the MP, and says, will you speak to the cops and so on, and go above the heads of the local dadas and get it done. This sort of social work, in the simple way of putting it, of being an active presence in the community. This is the kind of thing we need to do much more of to revive our connections with ordinary people.
The other big challenge, of course, is that Indian politics has taken a hard rightward turn, right? Everywhere we're seeing whatever one calls it, Hindutva, or an even more extreme manifestation of it, which is bigotry, rampant Islamophobia, all that on the ascendant. How would Shashi Tharoor take that on?
I think we just have to stand up against it. There's no question of attempting in any way to come to terms with that kind of thing. It's wrong. It shames us. It's introduced a toxin into our society, which frankly damages who we are as a people. So as far as I'm concerned, the Congress must be uncompromising.
But do you
I know
think,
that some
do you
people...
think that, yeah, that's what I was about to say. Do you think that the Congress does enough of that? Because there's a sense that the Congress is itself partly compromised with that kind of shift.
I think there's been a certain unevenness in approach, and particularly I think in parts of northern India there's been a perception that, quote unquote, you can't afford to be seen as too much too sympathetic to a particular minority and so on. I think we've got to look beyond all that. If you have principles, stand by them. If you're willing to abandon your principles, then obviously you don't have any worth the name. So let's be sticking to our convictions. I don't think that we can afford to sort of soft pedal our beliefs, and those beliefs are deeply entrenched in what the Congress has always stood for. We can't change those. Let me add that in South India, we don't really have a problem with this. We stand up. My constituency is only 10% Muslim, but I've been able to be quite outspoken on Hindu-Muslim issues, and my voters have accepted that because we're appealing to the better nature of Indians and of Hindus in particular. This is not who you are. You don't go around bashing up people because of their religion. That is not who you are.
But the PFI, the ban on the Congress
That's
appears
a
to have
different
been
matter.
silent.
Extremism and communalism of any community should be condemned. And I do believe that the Congress party did the right thing in welcoming the ban on the PFI. I'm not a great fan, as a sort of civil liberties person, of bans generally. But assuming that the intelligence agencies have managed to pick up sufficiently credible information about involvement in violence and so on, that should have no place in our democracy.
No, but Shashi, while you say that it's important that the Congress stand up against bigotry, xenophobia and all of that, there is a sense in which people like you have been advocating that equally the Congress shouldn't go back to a certain hard secularism that was associated with it in earlier times, and that you need to, quote unquote, respect Hindu sentiment, which some say is a kind of slippery slope.
No, well, those of you who've read my book, Why I'm a Hindu, will know what I was trying to say, which is that you must acknowledge that for a lot of people their faith is fundamental. It's really who they are, and you can't expect them to suddenly overlook it. So the kind of agnostic secularism practiced by some, let's say in the 50s and so on, that has certainly got very limited appeal in India today. But you can be a proud Hindu who understands his Hinduism to be one, as Vivekananda famously said, not just of tolerance, but of acceptance. The Hindu says, look, I believe I have the truth, you believe you have the truth, I'll accept and respect your truth, please respect my truth. And you know, this is the basis in which you can have coexistence in our society. So the Hindu, in saying that we should acknowledge that people, their Hinduism matters to them, this is actually a recognition of lived reality. But it does not mean that being a Hindu makes you a Hindutvavadi who is automatically starting off with a chip on his shoulder about minorities and who is hostile in an overt and aggressive way against others. That is not at all part of what Hinduism is, if you have taken the trouble to read and understand what Hinduism has taught and preached for millennia.
But what would you say to the argument that why should political parties get into this space at all, right? Why not have that church-state?
We had no choice. I mean, when people ask me, for example, about my book, you know, why write it? And I said because I had written the same thing in about 3 pages in my book, India from Midnight to the Millennium, a quarter of a century earlier, almost 3 decades earlier. But the BJP has left us no choice. By putting this out front and center politically, and by claiming to be the only true voice of Hindus, they are both distorting what Hinduism stands for and at the same time fragmenting the political preferences on the basis of religion, which has never been what Hinduism was about. So to my mind, it was necessary then for us to hit back, and this is the way that I choose to hit back, not by saying that Hinduism in any way is bad or is wrong for India, anything. On the contrary, I'm saying I am a Hindu. Many of us in the Congress party are Hindus. We practice this faith, but we don't understand by Hinduism what the Savarkars and Golwalkars did. We instead understand what Vivekananda, Mahatma Gandhi and other great Hindus have taught us.
As we start to wrap up, the last challenge which I see for you is the fact that the party doesn't have an organization, right? I mean, this is an extreme characterization, but if the organization is in disarray, it's nowhere close to the kind of machine the BJP has built. Partly one of the problems for that is that there wasn't a 24/7 president at the top all the time. Will you be, if you win, 24/7?
Absolutely, there's no question about that. But at the same time, I think it's unfair to blame the president alone for these things.
But surely that was part of the letter as well.
There's a flaw up and down the system. And I think we need to do both, yes, inspirational, committed 24/7 leadership from the person heading the party, but equally, we need to revive structures all the way down to the district and block levels. This can be done.
What happens to all your other pursuits, your book writing, your literary festival hopping? Is that all going to stop?
Well, some of it will have to go on hold for a while. I mean, it's never going to stop in the sense that there is something in me that makes me want to write or want to put my ideas out there. But it will certainly be, it has been subordinate to my political life already.
Okay.
It'll take a much smaller place if this particular opportunity comes along.
Okay, we're going to end with a rapid fire. The first thing that you will do if you become president, after becoming president, other than thanking Sonia Gandhi?
Thanking the voters, thanking the workers, and pledging to revive.
First decision that you will take.
We'll wait and see.
We'll wait and see. Will you be willing to do a debate, an American-style debate with your opponent, whoever he or she may be?
If he or she is willing, sure. Absolutely no problem.
Rahul Gandhi's greatest strength?
Greatest strength? He's an extremely good human being with a big heart and a capacious and a truly compassionate spirit. Amazing person.
Rahul Gandhi's greatest weakness?
I think perhaps sometimes he is precisely that great spirit and doesn't always perhaps come across as somebody who's practical in terms of politics. Having said that, he's putting his feet in a way that nobody else has done in recent memory for 150 days of marching through the country.
That's not quite a weakness. You've managed to bypass that.
No, I'm just saying he's overcome that weakness. I mean, first of all, he's put his feet quite literally, as it were, on the ground to show that he's not disconnected.
Narendra Modi's greatest strength?
I think his oratory is absolutely compelling and impressive. He's probably the finest speaker in Hindi that our country has seen. And even though one would argue that Vajpayee had that reputation, one would say that Mr. Modi is perhaps even more effective. He's more theatrical and more effective.
Greatest weakness, Narendra Modi?
I think in some ways it is precisely the disconnection between oratory and implementation. You know, you make fine speeches in which you diagnose problems and you even seem to suggest solutions. But then on the ground you have disaster. I mean, demonetization is a great example of that.
Last question. Is there a Tharoorism that you have to describe your chances in this election?
No, there's no Tharoorism. Let the voters decide.
Okay.
You know, I mean, the fact is that
there's no word that comes to mind.
not off the top of my head.
Not off the top of my head, but if you think of something, then you can tweet it at me.
All right, Vasu, will do.
But Shashi Tharoor, all the very best for these elections, and thank you so much indeed for talking to us.
Thanks. Good to be here.